Welcome to British Focus, the channel where we break down the biggest political scandals and expose the truth behind the headlines. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because today, we're diving into a crisis that could shake the very foundation of Keir Starmer's leadership. His own profession, the people who know the legal system inside out, are turning against him. And they're not just criticising him. They're demanding his resignation. Yes, you heard that right. Elite lawyers, top legal minds, and former colleagues of Starmer are leading a full-blown rebellion against him. This isn't just another political controversy. This is an internal mutiny from the very system that shaped him. Imagine a football team revolting against its own captain. But this isn't a game. This is about the future of Britain. For years, Starmer has marketed himself as a man of integrity, a leader grounded in law and justice. His legal background was supposed to be his greatest strength, the very foundation of his credibility. But now, that same background is becoming his biggest weakness. His decisions are being picked apart by people who understand the law better than anyone else, and they're left baffled, frustrated, and furious. It's like he's operating in a parallel universe where logic and justice no longer apply. Legal experts are looking at his policies, at his leadership, and they don't recognize the man they once worked alongside. And they're not staying silent about it. We're talking about some of the most respected legal professionals in the country. People who have built their reputations on upholding justice, openly condemning Starmer's leadership. They are scrutinizing his every move, tearing apart his decisions with brutal precision. These aren't political opponents trying to score points. These are his own people, colleagues who once shared courtrooms with him, who now see him as a man unfit to lead. And let's be honest, when your own profession turns against you, it's a wake-up call. Or at least, it should be. But Starmer, he's sleepwalking through this crisis. He doesn't seem to grasp the gravity of what's happening. He's not just making bad decisions, he's betraying the principles he once stood for. Because let's not forget, the legal profession isn't just a job. It's about justice, integrity, and accountability. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And yet, Starmer has abandoned those very principles. The irony here is unbelievable. This is a man who built his career prosecuting others, holding people accountable for their actions. And now, he's the one being held accountable. He's the one under fire, and the verdict from his peers is clear: he's failing. And if he can't even keep the respect of the legal world, how can we trust him to run the country? This isn't just about lawyers being upset. This is about whether Britain's Prime Minister has the judgment, the competence, and the moral compass to lead. And let's be clear, this crisis isn't going away. Every day, more legal experts are coming forward. The backlash is growing, and the demand for his resignation is getting louder. Now, what does this mean for the average Brit? The hard-working people who are just trying to get by while Westminster plays its usual games? Well, think of it this way. Would you trust a doctor who had been completely disowned by the medical profession? Of course not. You'd run a mile. So why should we trust a Prime Minister who has lost the confidence of his own profession? If the legal world sees him as incompetent, why should the rest of us feel any different? And this isn't just about perception. This has real consequences. A weak leader in number 10 means bad decisions, unstable policies, and a government that is completely out of touch with reality. And the reality is, Starmer is losing credibility fast. He thought his background in law would protect him, that his career as a prosecutor would make him untouchable. But now, the very people he once worked with are tearing down his reputation. So what happens next? Well, let's just say the pressure is mounting. The calls for him to step down are not just coming from his political opponents. They're coming from inside the system, from the people who know exactly how things work. And when your own allies start calling for your head, you know you're in serious trouble. But Starmer is refusing to acknowledge the crisis. Instead of addressing the concerns head-on, he's doubling down, pretending everything is fine. But the cracks are showing, and they're getting bigger by the day. So let's ask the question no one in the mainstream media wants to touch. How long can Starmer survive this? How much longer before this rebellion from within forces him out? How much longer before Britain wakes up and realizes that our leader is in way over his head? One thing's for sure, this isn't over. The legal establishment isn't backing down, and the fallout from this rebellion is only just beginning. And trust me, we'll be keeping a close eye on this. So if you want the latest updates on the scandals, the cover-ups, and the stories the mainstream media won't tell you, hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Do you think Starmer can survive this crisis? Or is this the beginning of the end for him? Let us know what you think. Stay tuned, because this is just the start of what could be Starmer's biggest downfall yet. Keir Starmer's government is stumbling from one crisis to another, and this time, it's his disastrous private school tax policy and the scandal surrounding his Attorney General, Lord Hermer. These two issues have ignited a firestorm of controversy, exposing yet again how out of touch and incompetent Starmer's leadership truly is. Let's start with his latest assault on education. In a move that reeks of class warfare and short-sighted policymaking, Starmer has decided to slap VAT on private school fees. Now, Labour wants you to believe this is about taxing the rich, but in reality, this policy will hit some of the most vulnerable children in our society. Many families don't send their children to private schools because they're wealthy. They do it because the state system fails to provide the support their children desperately need. We're talking about children with special educational needs, disabilities, or complex learning difficulties. Children whose parents have no choice but to turn to private education because the public sector simply cannot cater to them. And now, thanks to Labour's reckless tax grab, these families are facing an unprecedented crisis. But they're not taking it lying down. Private schools are fighting back, preparing a high court challenge against the government. Their argument? This tax hike will force out vulnerable students and deprive them of the education they need. The government, of course, is trying to spin this disaster. They claim that children with an education, health, and care plan, EHCP, will be exempt. Sounds fair, right? Wrong. Here's the brutal truth. Out of 111,000 special needs pupils in private education, fewer than 8,000 actually have an EHCP. That means tens of thousands of children will be left stranded. And getting an EHCP? It's a bureaucratic nightmare. It can take up to 2 years due to severe council backlogs. Even Starmer's own education secretary admits the system is broken. So what are these families supposed to do in the meantime? The legal challenge against this policy isn't just about money. It's about fundamental human rights. Lawyers leading the case argue that this measure violates the right to education and protection against discrimination. This isn't just an administrative issue. This is a direct attack on some of Britain's most vulnerable children. And here's something that really stands out. This legal challenge isn't being backed by some wealthy elite. It's ordinary people, parents, teachers, and concerned citizens, who are crowdfunding the fight. That should tell you everything you need to know about how much this matters to real families. If this VAT policy goes through, the lawyers are ready to fast-track this case to the High Court. They want it heard before the tax kicks in this January. That's how urgent this situation has become. And you have to ask yourself, did Starmer really not see this coming? Or did he just not care? Because this is the problem with his leadership. He governs based on sound bites and political point scoring, rather than real-world impact. He thought he was taking an easy shot at the rich by taxing private schools, but instead, he's putting thousands of children in jeopardy. And if this were his only legal disaster, that would be bad enough. But there's another scandal brewing, one that threatens to undermine the entire justice system. Enter Lord Hermer, Starmer's newly appointed Attorney General. A role that is supposed to uphold the rule of law, defend national security, and act as the government's top legal advisor. And yet, in what can only be described as a catastrophic misjudgment, Starmer has appointed someone who previously represented families accusing British troops of war crimes. That's right, the man now in charge of advising the government on military legal matters has spent years fighting against our own armed forces in court. This isn't just an optics problem, this is a blatant conflict of interest. Right now, there is an ongoing inquiry into allegations of war crimes by UK Special Forces. And guess what? Lord Hermer has previously represented 33 Afghan families accusing the SAS of systematic extrajudicial killings. Now he's supposed to impartially advise the government on this very issue. It's like appointing a football referee who openly supports one of the teams. And it's not just about the military. Lord Hermer has also represented Sinn Féin's Gerry Adams and has been involved in numerous cases directly linked to current government affairs. Even Labour MPs are getting nervous. Some are quietly suggesting that Hermer should step back from certain cases. But let's be real, the damage to public trust is already done. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has slammed this appointment, calling out smears and innuendos against British troops. And Conservative MP Sir Ashley Fox has pointed out what should be obvious to everyone: declaring conflicts of interest is basic practice. When your political opponents have to remind you about professional ethics, you know you're in serious trouble. This scandal isn't just about Hermer, it's about Starmer's judgment. Because this isn't just political incompetence, this is dangerous. We're talking about serious allegations involving our armed forces. The men and women who risk their lives to protect us deserve better than to have their reputation tarnished by someone with such blatant biases. And it makes you wonder, did Starmer not do his homework before making this appointment? Or, again, did he just not care? Because that's the pattern we're seeing again and again. Reckless policies, poor judgment, a complete detachment from reality. Starmer's government thought they could quietly push through this appointment without anyone noticing. Instead, they've created one of the biggest controversies of his leadership. But what's really at stake here goes far beyond a single legal scandal. It's about the credibility of the government itself. Because when your education policies are forcing vulnerable children out of school, when your legal decisions are enraging the very profession you come from, when your own MPs are worried that you're compromising national security, at what point does it stop being a series of unfortunate missteps and start being a pattern of complete and utter failure? One thing's for certain, Starmer's leadership is cracking under the weight of these scandals. And the British people are starting to notice. So what happens next? Will this legal rebellion force Starmer to backtrack on his education policy? Will the growing outrage over Lord Hermer's appointment push him out of government? One thing is clear. This is just the beginning of a crisis that Starmer might not be able to escape from. We'll be following this story closely, so if you want the latest updates on the scandals that matter, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And tell us what you think in the comments. Should Starmer reverse his education tax before it's too late? Should Lord Hermer step down? Or is this government simply beyond saving? Let us know, because your voice matters. Keir Starmer's government is lurching from one disaster to another, and the damage is piling up. The economy is spiraling, his EU strategy is falling apart, and his immigration policy is an outright betrayal of the British people. Each failure is more catastrophic than the last, yet he carries on as if nothing is wrong. The question isn't if this will catch up with him, it's when. His latest economic plan is nothing short of economic sabotage. A £25 billion hike in national insurance contributions for businesses, a move so reckless that even his own party members are uneasy. Starmer and Labour love to talk about fairness, but what's fair about forcing businesses to slash jobs just to survive? In December alone, 47,000 payroll jobs vanished, the biggest drop since the pandemic. And that's just the beginning. This tax burden will cripple small businesses, push investment out of the UK, and send unemployment skyrocketing. But Starmer, he refuses to see the warning signs. His economic policies are built on the delusion that higher taxes mean higher revenue. But what happens when businesses can't afford to operate? They shut down, they cut jobs, and the economy shrinks. And let's not forget Labour's inheritance tax plans. They claim it's about making the rich pay their fair share, but in reality, it's a blueprint for driving wealth, investment, and businesses out of the UK. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility says Labour's plans won't generate meaningful economic growth. They estimate the UK economy will expand at the same rate as before despite Labour's £7 billion in additional spending. So where's the benefit? Rachel Reeves, Labour's so-called economic mastermind, is looking more like a growth killer with every policy announcement. It's almost as if Labour is deliberately trying to sabotage the economy before even getting into power. Or maybe, they're just completely clueless. And while the economy is in freefall, Starmer is desperately trying to rewrite Britain's relationship with the EU. His grand plan to reset relations with Brussels has been met with a brick wall. Starmer expected a warm welcome, a hero's reception. Instead, The EU isn't interested. One Brussels diplomat put it bluntly. We are perfectly happy with the Windsor framework and other deals we have in place. Translation: they've moved on. The EU isn't sitting around waiting for Starmer to come crawling back. In fact, they hardly even care what he has to say. Starmer insists he doesn't want to rejoin the single market or the customs union. But let's be honest, does anyone actually believe him? His entire strategy feels like a backdoor attempt to undo Brexit piece by piece. And people aren't buying it. Leave voters see through the deception, and Remain voters know the EU won't offer anything better than what we already have. It's a lose-lose situation, and Starmer is walking a tightrope that's fraying beneath him. He's stuck. He can't backtrack on Brexit, but he can't move forward either. And while he's busy failing in Brussels, his immigration policies are draining the country dry. The government is now spending a staggering £5.4 billion a year on migrants. That's £8 million every single day. And this isn't just about food and shelter. We're talking about luxury hotels, designer clothes, and priority treatment. There's even a warehouse in Dover stocked with high-end clothing for migrants, where they can pick whatever they want. £3,000 a day spent on clothes alone. That's over £1 million a year. Meanwhile, British families are struggling to heat their homes. Pensioners are choosing between food and warmth. But where's their free clothing? Where's their luxury accommodation? It's a national disgrace. Starmer promised to get tough on illegal immigration, but what's happening now? Record high crossings, billions wasted, and a government that is too weak to stop the chaos. Instead of protecting Britain's borders, Starmer is opening the floodgates and handing out five-star treatment. And it's not just the public who are furious. Labour MPs are starting to panic. Rumours of a leadership coup are spreading, with many inside the party believing Starmer won't survive long enough to fight the next election. His approval ratings are collapsing. His own colleagues are whispering behind closed doors. And with every crisis, his grip on power weakens. So the real question isn't if Starmer will fall, but when. Will it be the economy that takes him down? Will it be his Brexit blunders? His immigration disaster? Or will his own party force him out before voters even get the chance? One thing is certain, this can't continue forever. Britain deserves better. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to stay updated on the stories the mainstream media won't cover. And tell us in the comments, how much longer do you think Starmer can survive this disaster? Is his leadership doomed? We want to hear from you.